Welcome into another episode of the Autzen Audibles podcast. Erik Skopil coming to you on a beautiful Tuesday morning out here in Eugene. It is Rutgers week. Oregon 17.5-point favorites. By the way, kind of fun. These teams never played each other before on the gridiron. This will be a first. We bring on Bobby Deren of ScarletNation.com this morning. Bobby, thanks for joining us here. We're going to break down this matchup.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I wanted to start with this. I don't know how relevant this is for our listeners, but it was interesting that the top four stories over on ScarletNation.com this morning were kind of regarding Rutgers and their NIL situation. Seems that there's been positive developments. Kind of what's been the story? I did notice watching the 14-minute and 16-second Craig Schiano press conference that it was pretty much all NIL related questions, a couple related to Oregon. He handled it much better than Mike Gundy, by the way. People should be aware of that. Kind of what's been the deal there, and why is this such a big part of kind of what's going on with the program right now?
Well, Rutgers just brought in a new AD, Kelly Zinn, this summer, and they're launching a new NIL initiative this weekend. So it was kind of a topic that came up because of that. And prior to her arrival, Rutgers was without an AD for the past year.
Wow.
Pat Hobbs was fired. They had two interim ones, and nothing really got done. But on his watch, he didn't want to be involved in NIL. So Greg Schiano basically had to go out and do all his own fundraising, basically wherever he could, trying to get money. There was there was a collective, and they did, an admirable job, but they weren't able to raise the funds necessary to compete with the Big Ten teams. I mean, their, average war chest is the smallest in the Big Ten. So going out and playing teams, 10, 15, $20 million, they're at a tremendous disadvantage. So yesterday he was pressed whether it would be the same as any past initiatives. And he kind of just let it all out and said, wait a minute. There was no efforts. He said, I was the only one doing the efforts, and basically said, look, nothing has been happening. He said they're not even on par with Division I teams, let alone Big Ten teams. So he kind of, and we kind of knew that was going on, but it was never, announced in a public forum like that. And I think he just had enough, but it also showed a comfortability with and they just hired a new president too. And for the first time, they have a president who's really supportive of athletics. So it's been an uphill battle for Greg Schiano. He's kind of, going to a gunfight with a pocket knife, hoping he can get a hit in. So that's why it's such a big topic. And this year, Rutgers has been just a little bit shy of wins against Iowa, against Minnesota, and they were defeating Washington at halftime, and things fell apart in the second half. But a couple players here or there could make a big difference. And now everybody's kind of behind the NIL thing and saying, well, they can finally get some quality players. That's the optimistic point of view. So, heading into Oregon with a 3-3 record, fans are realistic about what's going to probably happen. Rutgers has struggled defensively. The speed that Oregon has, with those, on offense, Dante Moore quarterback. I mean, it's just, they know what they're up against. So the NIL thing is very promising for the future, because in games that were really close the last few weeks, they figure if they can get this NIL going, those games they'll get over the hump, and those games will be wins. Because, they could have been 5-0 going into Washington, blew second half leads to Minnesota and Iowa, and made some costly mistakes. A penalty at the end kept an Iowa drive going. Some special teams miscues in both losses. So without rehashing that, the game was there for their taking.
I wanted to go to I do have a question on the second half for you in a second, but I did want to go to Schiano for a second, because it's on his career arc is kind of interesting, a little unique in terms of being at Rutgers for 10 years, then about a 10-year break, then coming back and kind of emerging and really leading the program back up the rung a little bit. Why is he the right type of person to run this football program?
Well, Rutgers is a different place. It's nestled in kind of the middle of New Jersey. Everybody associates it with New York, but it's still about an hour to get into the city from there. And you have the New York fan base on one top of the state in North Jersey, and South Jersey is the Philadelphia fan base. Then you have Rutgers in there. And I mean, you have two teams in New York. You have the Mets, the Yankees, the Giants, the Jets. It's a lot going on. And then you have Rutgers there, and they don't have an illustrious history of winning. So Greg Schiano came from New Jersey. He started with Joe Paterno, and he kind of understood the climate there, so to speak. And he got them to respectability. When he left, there were some disastrous hires in his absence, and things didn't work out with him as the head coach of Tampa Bay. Then he went on to become the DC at Ohio State, and it just worked out timing wise that he was available, and Rutgers needed someone, to bring him back, because I mean, Chris Ash was coaching before him, was also the prior DC at Ohio State. They lost the game 78-0 to Michigan and didn't get a first down till late in the third quarter. That just tells you how deep into the abyss they were. So he brought them back, 2 straight winning seasons, 2 straight bowl games, beat Miami in the one. So it's been, it's been a good match, because he understands what is needed to win there. It's not an easy place to win. You can't just plug a coach in there, and especially with a lack of NIL. I don't know how he's gotten some of the people to stay. The players that are of good quality.
And this is a roster that on offense has a lot of high-end players. I wanted to dive in here. Quarterback Athen Kaliakmanis.
Athen Kaliakmanis.
Okay. We did a practice run before recording, because I wanted. This is. I was saying I'm familiar with so many of these tough Polynesian names. I'm not used to. I think it's a Greek name.
It's a Greek, yes.
That is a challenge here. I wanted to start with him because he's a very experienced starting quarterback. This is going to be start number 36, split between Minnesota and Rutgers. I think he's 18 and 17 as a starting quarterback. Again, at 2 programs where it's a little more difficult to win a lot of football games. He's done admirably there. He seems very comfortable in this offense. Why is he a good fit? And then I want to get into some of the skill guys after, because I think they're pretty intriguing and interesting matchups for Oregon defensively.
Well, he came over from Minnesota and reunited with OC Kirk Ciarrocca, who was his offensive coordinator there. So they have that familiarity, and they kind of know each other real well. And Aiden is a very smart quarterback, makes good reads, good plays, doesn't beat himself. And he has a very good receiving core. As good as he's been running the offense, he's the team leader. He has some really good receivers. Ian Strong is 6'3", 6'4", KJ Duff 6'6". Sometimes he just has to throw it around them and they get the ball. So he's had some help in that regard, but he's just he's a relentless worker. The team loves him, offense and defense. Just plays with a lot of poise, and he's a veteran. He's what you'd expect out of a guy who started upwards of 40 games. And it's been the best Rutgers passing offense in more than a decade. So fans are used to just, languishing through one bad year after another offensively. And even when Schiano came back, it was more of a defensive oriented team. And it's really flipped the script now in that the defense is struggling and the offense is carrying them. It's something that the fans really haven't seen. And it started middle of last season. Kaliakmanis really went on a run and they started putting up some points, and it's carried over into this year. He's just what you'd expect out of a fifth-year senior. He was a 4-star coming out, not a high 4-star coming out of high school in Minnesota, but nevertheless a 4-star.
Antoine Raymond, I just have written down here in my notes. Ask why he's awesome, because this is PFF's number 4 graded running back in the country. I don't know, Bob, if you care about PFF grades. I'm beginning to care a little less. They seem kind of like all over the place. But when they have a guy that high up the rung, that tells me something. This is one of the Big Ten's best running backs. I know this has kind of been a deal where he was maybe supposed to be in a bit of a split role, or not quite the bell cow coming in, but there's been some injuries, been some things that have changed it. He has seemingly flourished. What's the story with Raymond?
Started 2 games last year. Now, technically, he should only be a true freshman. He's from Canada, and the school he was at was closing down in Florida. It was one of those schools that, housed a lot of Canadian kids, Clearwater Academy International. Mm-hmm. And when it was closing down, Schiano went to him and said, how about you enroll early? We'll get you in here. And he had, 20-some offers. So they knew if he went somewhere else that year, he probably would have blown up, and it would have been a tough grab. So they got him in last year, started 2 games, played behind Kyle Monungai, played well. and really has progressed though, because last year you saw him, he would make some moves in the open field. Now he's running through contact, making people miss. He's really a dynamic running back, and he's really improved from last year. I mean, he had a good game coming in as a true freshman, which he should have only been a senior in high school.
It's crazy.
And now he was supposed to split carries with CJ Campbell, who came in from FAU, who was formerly at Florida State before that. And he was injured in game 3 on his first carry, out for the season. So Campbell was kind of brought in. He had over 800 yards rushing at FAU, 40 catches. So they were going to kind of split the role and carry the load for Kyle Monangai, who had back-to-back seasons with over 1,200 yards, playing with the Bears now as the number 2 behind DeAndre Swift as a rookie. And he was, the first 1,000-yard rushers at Rutgers in more than a decade. So now Raymond's on pace to do that. And when I keep reciting these numbers and these things, it just shows you how abysmal the offense was for upwards of a decade. So, but Raymond, he just does a little bit of everything. He can even stay in and block on third down. So he's a guy that's really been impactful this year and just does a little bit of everything. You watch him, you go, wow, man, he can make people miss. He can run for power. He can run through contact. He has good vision. He just, in last game, they never used the running back, caught 7 passes for 89 yards. So they're adding that to his repertoire too. And he's been a real pleasant surprise because coming off of 2 seasons with Monangai, Isaiah Pacheco, who's with the Chiefs, preceded him. You really didn't know what you were going to get. I mean, Raymond showed glimpses this last year, but he's putting it all together now.
Yeah, I will say Dan Lanning on his Monday evening press conference said of how players are playing now, this is the best running back Oregon has faced and maybe will face all season. So that was high praise and kind of stuck with me as well. You mentioned it briefly with Ian Strong and KJ Duff. I was looking again over at PFF. They track the contested catch rate. These are the 2 best in the Big Ten at this in terms of when the ball is up for grabs, these guys go up and get it. You mentioned it, 6'3" for Strong, 6'6" for Duff. Over 60% for both of them contested catch rate. I was watching the Washington Rutgers game live last Friday. I saw Duff's touchdown catch that was in heavy traffic and was able to come down with it. Big bodies. Seems like Ethan likes throwing to these guys. Kind of what's the deal with these 2?
They're actually high school teammates, both from Long Island, New York. Strong didn't start playing till his senior year of high school. And at the time, KJ Duff was the guy. And he was kind of learning from him, even though he was a year older. But he's really, embraced that role. Came in as a safety, and Greg Schiano said, why don't you switch, play wide receiver, get you on the field early. And it's really worked out. I mean, they make tough catches look routine. And not just what you see on game field. You see them in practice, see them in scrimmages, and somebody in the NFL told me once that's how you can really tell the difference between these receivers, these guys that just make these spectacular catches like they're ordinary ones, and that's what they do. So Callie McManus kind of just has to throw it around these guys, and chances are they're going to come down with it. And I think Strong might be a little bit faster than Duff right now, but Duff's a little bigger. They both offset each other nicely. And then you got DT Sheffield in the slot, who's a little quick guy, transfer from North Texas, had 66 catches last year, and he's right behind them. Right now they're, the total is around 100 catches for all 3 of them combined, and Strong didn't play 1 game. So he has 400-yard receiving games. Just a really good receiving core. And those big guys, they just create problems. And there's games where Strong, they've been on me to guard them, DPIs getting called downfield on them. It's been frustrating for a lot of defenders. Minnesota found a way to kind of bottle them up a little. They were really paying close attention to them. But those are 2 guys that definitely keep an eye on because they've been very successful. And, hate to continue to say, the best receivers in a long time. This is the best receiving core in more than a decade. You might have to go back 15 years to Greg Schiano's first time around when they were very successful.
Well, and I think Oregon fans listening are probably going, oh no, because Elijah Surratt just did a lot of the same kind of things you're talking about with the contested catches and beating Oregon's secondary. That is a big question mark coming out of that game. It wasn't coming in. Oregon statistically stacked up better than just about anybody in the country defending outside wide receivers going in. Really struggled with Surratt. Not getting a lot easier this week, that's for sure. Let's flip to the other side of the ball here, Bobby. I'm curious. When I was doing my kind of summer scout, I was really intrigued by the two edge rushers, Eric O'Neill from James Madison, Bradley Weaver from Ohio. These were two of the most productive pass rushers, havoc wreckers, if you will, in the country last year, playing at a little smaller schools. Like both these guys had 15 to 18 tackles for loss, lots of sacks. How have they settled into this, a step up in level, but also kind of as maybe a focal points for this defense?
It really hasn't been what's been expected. It's been kind of a disappointment. Fans expected a lot more out of these guys, and it really hasn't translated. And they said, last year, Eric O'Neill, if he just get half the sacks, that he had last year, 6.5, but he's not even on pace for that this year. So it's been a struggle, and it's put a lot of pressure on the secondary covering. Just quarterbacks are given too much time. They've been close to making a lot of plays, but they're not able to make them. I don't know if it's the step up in competition. Maybe they just can't handle the Big Ten. And it's tough with some of these teams, some of these offensive linemen. So I just don't know if they were able to make that leap. But it's been tough generating a pass rush, and it's, like I said, put pressure on the defense. And you saw second half, Washington just did whatever they wanted against them. They were able to maybe bend, not break, and get a few stops in the first half. But it's been kind of the narrative of the season. The defense just hasn't been good. Some of these transfers, and we had mentioned the NIL. Rutgers doesn't have the NIL to go out and get the caliber of players that Oregon will have. I know some of the valuations, but some of those transfers come in, and Rutgers is a far cry from those guys, what they got. So they rolled the dice on these two guys, Bradley Weaver from Ohio and Eric O'Neill from James Madison, had over 20 sacks combined last year, just a handful this year. And not even just that, but there's just not been a lot of pressure. And quarterbacks are able to get out. And even sometimes when it collapses, there's nobody there. As you saw, Damon Williams just had a field day last week, running all over him, throwing it. It was just, by the end, it was almost like watching it. How are they going to score? Not if they'll score. But defense has been a disappointment. Rutgers will score on offense, but they're going to give up some points on defense.
Coming out of the Indiana game, I think one of the big narratives was Oregon's inability to kind of hold up against some exotic blitzes. Is this something that Rutgers will do a lot? You mentioned having a hard time getting there with the pass rush. Are they willing to bring extra numbers, be creative so far? What have you seen?
They will here and there, but there's nothing that's going to be nothing that I've seen so far where you're going to say, wow, really, they don't have that dynamic guy that can do it. And Rob Smith is a new DC, and he's, fans have not taken well to him. But the bottom line is, you can blame some of the coaching for a lot of things. If the guys can't make plays, they just can't make plays, And I don't know the answer. Can they dial up some new blitzes? I haven't seen it yet. So I'm inclined to think Oregon's going to score quite a few points. If I was a betting man, I would take the over in this game. Put the mortgage on it, maybe.
You've kind of probably covered it maybe already, but the second half here, I've got it down 62-20. Big Ten games, that's what the opponents have outscored them. And these are games where I think it was 65-55, Rutgers an advantage in the first half, leading two of those three games, at half tied in the other. You mentioned some special teams issues. We talked about the defense. The offense, though, being kind of held in check a little bit as well. What's changed, I guess, just from first half, second half? What have you seen there?
Yeah, it's been a big topic, and second half, they'll come out and try to run some of the same stuff. The defense makes adjustments. I think the bottom line is sometimes defensively they get gassed. It's just a question of players not being good enough. You ever see games where, a team will stick around for the first half, and then third, fourth quarter, you kind of see what's what, and that team, takes advantage and starts to own the game. And I think that's what you see on defense. Offense is curious, though, because they have the players, and you kind of think, well, what's going wrong in the second half? There's some games where they didn't have a lot of possessions in the second half, some games where they just didn't execute. Against Minnesota, it was an errant snap from a fifth-year senior to fifth-year senior center, fifth-year senior quarterback, started many games, took his eyes off the ball. It was a bad snap. It put him out of field goal range, and they lost by 3. So it's been bad rolls of the dice for them so far. But offensively, it's a good question because you watch that first half and different ways that they can't execute in the second half. So it really has left fans kind of sour on the adjustments in the second half. But it's various reasons. It's just not working after halftime, and the points speak for themselves. Against Washington, like I said, they just couldn't keep pace with that offense. But offensively, it seems like sometimes they just go into hiding in that second half.
Halftime adjustments a big point of contention in Eugene after the Indiana game as well, Bobby. So I think the two of us are dealing with probably a very similar mindset from the opposing fan bases. Injuries, I always like to ask any big injury updates. You mentioned Campbell out for the year at running back. Anything else we should know?
Had some injuries earlier in the season to guys, and they were getting hit at left there on his third starting left tackle, brought in a transfer they thought was going to start, injured in training camp, out for the season. Guy who started the first 2 games, out for the season. So, but that unit's been, it's been formidable. Pat Flaherty, offensive line coach, had won 2 championships with the New York Giants. He does a really good job of getting more, or the most, I should say, out of his players who are not 4-star guys across the board. So, no recent injuries really to speak of. They lost Campbell, they lost starting linebacker Moses Walker a couple weeks ago. You see a bunch of guys that went down earlier, but recently they got out of last game relatively healthy. A few bumps and bruises, but you're not going to see any huge names really impact this game injury wise.
Last couple for you here. What's the vibe check out there? I know this is a sellout at SHI Stadium from what I read. Seems like there's some anticipation here. Kind of what's been the talk around the area about a top 10 team coming to town?
Well, first time playing Oregon, and it's Oregon. You know what I mean? The fans here, it's a new team they're playing. It's one of the top teams in the country. There's excitement, but I think that, like I said, there's a realism to it that this defense has not been up to snuff. And coming off a loss to Indiana, it feels like Oregon's going to be out for blood this game. So, but there is excitement because this is also a fan base who, before joining the Big Ten in 2014, was playing games every year against the USF and UConn and Syracuse. So there's a bit of an exciting factor in the Big Ten stuff. I mean, it's been a decade, but all these new teams, all these new venues, it's where they want to be. Now it's a question, can they compete? I think this week they just want to put up a respectable, at least from a fan. Obviously fans would want to upset, but
Sure.
just to be competitive and be formidable against them and not have them lay a giant number on the defense. And with the whole NIL revelation, I think that kind of changed the narrative of the season a little bit. And because fans were a little disappointed after the past few losses. I mean, Washington, you can kind of see, and Washington's got a good offense, but
Sure.
the other 2 games were there for the taking, Minnesota and Iowa. So get out of try to compete, be formidable, and put on a decent show under the lights.
Last question I always ask our guests for these is just give me a key on offense, a key on defense. It can be under the context of an upset. It can be under the context of kind of what you're saying, just a respectable loss that kind of maybe keeps fans happy. What's the thing on each side of the ball that you need to see from this Rutgers team on Saturday?
I want to see more consistency in the second half. We talked about it. Even if you're in a matchup where Oregon's just putting up points, try to keep pace a little bit offensively. Start to show more towards the end and not just, I think fans are frustrated with the hot starts and then going quiet. Defensively, get some takeaways. That Rutgers is such the record is dramatically improves when they take the ball away, and they just haven't been able to do it much this year. That's one of the ways they can at least attempt to slow this Oregon offense down. Maybe get a takeaway here, maybe there. You know what I mean? Maybe a bend don't break one, turning a field goal, or will be touchdown into a field goal. So I think looking for that and just anything on defense to kind of help them play more consistently. They only let up 10 points last week to Washington in the first half, but 28 points second half, and the game got out of hand really quickly, and that could happen again. So I think fans are hopeful that they can kind of contain them if that's possible. Like I said, maybe a touchdown goes into a field goal, maybe you get a takeaway, maybe you get a stop here or there, but defensively just looking for more consistency and not getting gashed through the second half.
Great stuff, Bobby. Really appreciate you here. Oregon fans can check me out on Thursday. We'll do our podcast preview with John Evans. Saturday's game at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time on the Big Ten Network. Bobby, really appreciate the time, and be kind of fun doing this more regularly now that these teams are in conference, as weird as it feels, because they're literally on opposite corners of the country.
Yeah, right now I'm in Jersey, you're in Oregon, so it's quite a distance between us.
All right. Talk to you later, folks.